Hi, I'm Caitlin. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing a September wrap-up, and I had to think about that then. So in September I managed to read 9 books, which is pretty good going for me. I tend to average maybe like 6 or 7 in a month, so this was definitely on the higher end of things. And part of me thinks that's because I actually set and mostly stuck to a TBR this month. So it was Magical Readathon hosted by G over at Book Roast. It was the autumn equinox, where we pick a calling and then you read books corresponding to prompts in order to complete exams for that calling. So my calling is Feastmaster, and I've done this for a few years now under this calling. Maybe this might actually be my second year for this one, but I've been doing the readathon for about 4 years, never really succeeding. But I'm pleased to say this year I did actually read a book for each of the prompts. So I had 7 prompts I needed to fill, and if you'd seen my September TBR, I'd set out books for each of them. I did shuffle them around a little bit and tried to fit in books that I was reading for those prompts, so they are slightly different to the books. The books I read are slightly different to the ones I set out to read, but I did still read the 7 books for the 7 prompts. So I'm just going to go in order of how I read them. So the first book I read in September was The Wicked Lives of Habrin Fair by Anna Fateni, and that fulfilled the, sorry I'm having to check this, the hatchlings prompt for animal studies, which was to read a debut. So Wicked Lives of Habrin Fair follows a girl called Sabrina who lives in this little village right next to a forest, and for her whole life she's been told never to go into the forest. If you do, you don't come back. And one day her older sister, I can't remember if she's older or younger, I want to say it's her older sister, goes missing, and she just knows that she's gone into the forest. And Sabrina doesn't want her family to lose someone else. Her father's just been tried and held accountable for a crime, so he's being shipped to Australia to hold out his sentence, and they may never see him again. So she doesn't want anyone else from her family going anywhere, so takes it upon herself to go after her sister and try and stop her. Now this forest is filled with all kind of mythical beings, namely fairies, who are dark and mischievous, as they always are. And yeah, Sabrina kind of gets caught up in this and then has to kind of beat them at their own game, I want to say. So this is written by a Welsh author. Anna Fateni is actually, I don't know if she's from Cardiff or has lived in Cardiff. And there's a lot of Welsh mythology in the book, which I really, really enjoyed. I haven't really read much with Welshness in there, and someone who's Welsh, I really should read more, so that was really fun. And there's lots of like Welsh words and things throughout, which I slipped in there, which I really appreciated. Yeah, it was a really fun read. It was extremely atmospheric, which was great, and like a little bit dark and creepy, but not only the atmosphere, not in contents kind of thing. I did rate it 3 stars, so pretty middle of the road for me. I wouldn't say there was anything in there that was extraordinary, but I did really enjoy the majority of it. It was quite a short book. It was only 265 pages, so for me to really get sucked into a fantasy like that, it would need to be longer, hence the slightly lower rating. But I did enjoy the contents, and I look forward to anything else Anna Fateni writes, and I hope it is more Welsh things, because that was really fun. So the next book I read then was The Odyssey of Phoebe Quilliam by Annalise Gray, and I read this also for a prompt, which was Stormcall prompt for elemental studies, which is to have water on the cover. I don't have this book either, so I'll insert a picture and you can see the water on there. This one we follow Phoebe, who is going through a lot in her life. Her grandma, who she spends a lot of time with, is in a home because she is suffering from dementia. So her and her mum are selling the grandmother's house, and it's somewhere that Phoebe's always felt safe. Her grandma was very artistic, and Phoebe's following in her footsteps, so they had that passion together, and Phoebe's kind of a bit lost without her grandma and that hobby of hers in her life. And her grandma's always told her loads of mythical stories to do with like Greek mythology and things, and specifically about a friend she had when she was young. They met on holiday in, I want to say, Greece, and she told Phoebe all about her adventures and how they'd play at fighting a mythical monster, and how they'd always win and things. But all of her stories kind of had like a meaning behind them, like a lesson kind of thing. Is that what how I want to describe it? You know, in school when every story a teacher ever told you had like a teaching moment, it was kind of like that basically. And one day, just before they end up selling her grandma's house, Phoebe goes back and visits the grandma's studio, and in there's a painting which his grandma's been working on for years, and something's changed in the painting, and Phoebe's fairly certain it was never there before, so she decides to add to it to kind of like cover up that mistake or add to the picture, and get sucked into the world of where the picture is, which turns out to be, I want to say Ithaca, is that what it was called? I can't remember, I didn't write it down. And there she meets a young boy who's trying to find his father, who was a soldier of Odysseus. I got there. And so Phoebe kind of goes on their own odyssey with this boy to find his father, and in turn they have to then fight the mythical being of the Morphia. Lots of things go on, lots of Greek moments, a lot of which I had previously had like inklings about from Percy Jackson, which is really my only basis for Greek mythology. But yeah, it was fun. It was a fun time. It was a middle grade story, so it was quite short. It was 230 pages. I did read it quite quickly, but I really enjoyed all of the mythological side of things, and it was quite fast paced action all the way through, and I was really rooting for Phoebe to overcome her inner demons and to kind of find a way of coping with her grandmother's illness. That one was a 3.5, and it was enjoyable. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was very fun. Next up then, I actually have the physical books now for a few of these, which is good because otherwise I'm just inserting photos of everything. But next up, I completed the second prompt for animal studies, which was Baby Dragon Care, and that was to read a sequel. So I chose to read In the Weeds by B.K. Borison. So it's no secret that I love B.K. Borison. I read First Time Caller earlier this year, but a few years before that I actually started this series, which was I don't know whether it was called the Lovelight Farm series. Does it say? No, but it's kind of set in the same world. There's 4 books, they're all set in the Lovelight Farm's world, following different characters. So in this one we follow Evelyn St. James, who is an internet personality, I'd say. She got made famous by going and reviewing small businesses and helping them kind of get the recognition they deserve. And in the first story, Lovelight Farms, Evelyn is actually visiting Lovelight Farm on like a competition where the winner of this competition gets money to kind of help their business. So Evelyn meets the original cast in that, and we see her. And then in this one, whilst there, she spends one night with Beckett Porter, who works on the farm, who's best friends with the main character from the first one. I don't remember her name. Oh, maybe it's there. Stella. There we are. So she spends one night with Beckett, who's best friends with Stella from book 1, and that's it. They never see each other. Well, they don't see each other then until the story starts. And Evelyn's at a bit of a loss. She doesn't really know what makes her happy anymore. She isn't liking the direction that her career is going in. The last place Evelyn was happy was the town of Ingleworld, where Lovelight Farm is situated. And then she is kind of trying to discover herself, but also dealing with the fact that after the one night stand, she kind of just left Beckett and has not heard, they haven't heard from each other since. Then yeah, she just kind of starts living small town life and helping everyone else there and trying to discover herself in a way. I rated this 4 stars, which I think is higher than what I rated book 1, but yeah, I did really enjoy it, both Evelyn and Beckett. They were a fun couple. Typical grumpy sunshine, which is always a fun trope. It's actually one of my favourites, so I think that's why I got so much enjoyment out of this one. So next up then, I read Ghost Business by Jen DeLuca. This was kind of like thrown in there a little bit because I purchased it on a whim from work, and I was like, no, actually I feel like reading a ghost romance, and I fitted it in actually for a prompt to fill Continental Remedies prompt for the restoration class, and that was number generate a random number generate. That was to generate a random country and read a book from that country. So I went through my shelves, picked 5 countries that I knew I had books from, generated those. I got America, which is a bit boring really, but I took that as either the author being American or the setting being in America, and Gender Luca is American, I think, or the setting, one of the two fit basically. So that's where I fit that book in. So in Ghost Business we follow 2 main characters, and honestly the fact that I can't remember the names tells you my level of enjoyment for this book. So the premise is that the female main character grew up in this small town. She has a ghost tour business because it's quite a known haunted town, so she runs a ghost tour. And then the male main character moves into this town. He has a bigger ghost tour business across multiple cities, and he did his research and thought there wasn't one in this town, so decided to start one here. His business is on the line. His dad put money into it 5 years ago and said, if you don't make enough money in 5 years time, I'm shutting you down. So this is kind of like the be all and end all of his business. And then when he gets there, he realizes there is in fact a ghost tour, but that doesn't stop him. They decide to go like kind of like head to head, and whoever makes the most money in a set period of time stays open and the other ghost tour closes. As expected, their little rivalry turns into romance, and they also end up being neighbours, so we have that proximity trope in there as well. But there was just something about the execution which I wasn't a fan of. Their chemistry was pretty much non-existent. Like, he was pretty much a dick the entire time. Like, he just felt really unapproachable, and like there was no redeeming factors really about him. I just wasn't a fan. And then one day there just was romance there, and I was like, this is a bit much. Like, they went from 0 to 100 in like less than 60 seconds, and it just didn't make sense to me. Also, I didn't like, the stakes just didn't really work for this. I get that, like, oh yeah, my business could go, but it felt like fake stakes just for the plot. Oh, yeah, he's moving. The stakes were just there for the plot, and I wasn't a fan at all. So I actually rated this 2.5. Honestly, I only pushed through and finished it because I wanted to fill a prompt, and I was like, I've read most of it now anyway, I may as well finish. I don't think it took me that long, but I've already unhauled it. I sold it unvinted. Like, it's not one I'm gonna think about ever again, probably. So then the next 2 books I read don't fulfill prompts. They were just extra reads in the month. So I carried on then with my BK Borrowson hype and read Mixed Signals. So this is the 3rd book in the Love Like Farms series. And we follow Layla and Caleb. So Layla also works at Love Like Farms with Beckett and Stella from the previous 2 books. She is the baker. There's like a little bakery at the farms, and that's her place. And then we have Caleb, who was working in the police department but is now a teacher. So he made that jump before the book starts. So they've both grown up in this town, or well, Layla moved in a long time ago. They've both been in this town for a long time and never really looked at each other. Well, Caleb's had a huge crush on Layla basically the entire time, but Layla's never looked at him in that way. He kind of just comes to her cafe or bakery like 3 times a week, and that's the extent of their relationship. But they see each other out of town one evening. Layla's just had another bad date at the end of a string of bad dates, and she's kind of sick of men. And Caleb can never really get past the first date with a woman. He just kind of, everything fizzles out for him, and he doesn't know where he's going wrong. So they decide to have a pact where they'll date each other and then rate each other to see why things aren't working out in their respective love lives. As we know, that never works, and their fake dating starts to turn a little bit into real dating without them really realising it. And I really, really enjoyed this one. They were really cute together. I do like it when they're both like sunshine. It doesn't always have to be one or the other, like opposites attract. They're both very lovely people, very like family oriented. Well, he is anyway, and would do anything for their friends kind of thing. And I really enjoyed Layla's bakery. I'm a sucker for a small town cozy thing like that. So yeah, it was a really lovely story. I rated it 4 again, so it's another 4-star for BK Borison. But I do think that I probably enjoyed book 2 more than I enjoyed this one, but only slightly. This was still fun, and we still get to see the characters from the last 2 books in here as well, so there's the little bits of story progression for them, which is fun. Next up then was The Nightingale by Kristen Hannah, which was actually my buddy read with my best friend for this month. We try and read a book together every month, or every 2 months sometimes, and this was this month's. I wanted to read something by Kristen Hannah for quite a while, and really it was a toss-up between which one I'd go with first, but me and my friend decided on The Nightingale. So this one takes place in World War II. We follow 2 sisters, Vianne and Isabel. They're French. One lives in a small town on the outskirts of France, I think, and the other lives in Paris. And they don't really have a close relationship. Their mother died when they were young, and their father was suffering a lot after he returned from World War One. And Isabel, the younger sister, was kind of shipped off to boarding school, and Vianne got pregnant quite young, so married her boyfriend, and they had completely separate, different lives. Then on the eve of France's involvement in World War II, Vianne's husband goes to war, and Isabel goes to stay with Vianne, basically, and decides she wants to help the war effort. So yeah, they again have very different paths. Isabel's very headstrong and decides that she needs to do something about this and can't just sit by and let the war happen. But Vianne is just trying to get from day to day, trying to survive with her daughter. They then go off on very different paths and do very different things throughout the war, both just trying to survive. And honestly, it wrecked me. Like, it was heartbreaking. I visited Auschwitz earlier this year. Me and my husband went to Poland. It gave me an entirely new perspective, and I just feel like anything now that I read about World War II will just be more poignant than it once was. So I think that definitely played a part in my reading of this one. It was an incredibly heartbreaking story, but also incredibly important. It was so well written. Plot was immaculate. I was there with them, it felt like, during a lot of it. Like, she's just a wonderful writer. And there were a lot of heartwarming moments despite all of the awfulness. I'm extremely glad I read it, and I did rate it 5 stars, which is my first 5-star of the year. Can you believe it? In September. Actually wild. And then, so I read this lovely paperback copy, but it's already starting to get like a little bit damaged. It's got one of those covers where, you know, it's got like the film on top, so it's just going to start peeling away. And actually the day after I finished reading this, I went into work and was like absolutely raving about it to all my colleagues. And then this copy was actually there in store. So they just brought out this gorgeous 10-year anniversary edition, but like with these really pretty end pages. Not end pages, these really pretty edges, and then end papers with Paris, and the same front and back. But it is gorgeous, and I think because it hit me so deeply, and I enjoyed it so much, and it's my first 5-star of the year, it was just great timing, the fact that they brought this out, and I couldn't pass it up. So I'm a sucker for a special edition. Then I actually picked up Wisteria by Adeline Grace. This was the third and final book in the Belladonna series. I don't think it has an actual name, but that Belladonna was the first book. And I read that a couple years ago. Absolutely loved it. 5 stars. Couldn't stop thinking about it when I read it. Then I kind of prolonged reading the second one, which was Foxler. I put it off quite a bit. Same for this one. I just can't. Not very good at reading series all in one, and I think because I enjoyed the first book so much, I didn't want to finish this series. I just wanted to keep it going as long as I could. But it was finally time for me to actually get to Wisteria. So the first 2 books follow Signa Farrow and her love interest, and this one changes to follow a different character, and I think that was kind of making me trepidatious too, because I wasn't sure if I'd enjoy it as much. I did really enjoy it though. So this one we follow Blythe, and she ends up by a series of events from the last two novels in a position where she's protecting her cousin by fulfilling her end of a deal, but also dealing a lot with her past and the events of the previous two books. And if you've read the first two, you'll know if you've read the first two, you'll know that they are kind of magical in a sense in her family, and just they're kind of entangled in magic, let's say that. This was another romance. Great setting as per usual. I really enjoy the way Adeline Grace writes fantasy, like the worlds she makes, and like her very atmospheric and descriptive. It was more of an enemies to lovers story, which is not my favourite trope. I prefer like friends to lovers, or strangers to lovers even. But I did enjoy it in this one, and I think it was done well. Like, it wasn't insta-lovey. There was that tension and the shift from enemies to lovers, rather than it just being like straight up, oh, one day we're one, then we're suddenly madly in love. So it was like naturally progressive in that, and I do love the kind of mystery elements we get in this series. It's not just straight up romance or fantasy, it's kind of a mixture of the two, and then mystery too. So I wouldn't call it romantasy. I do say it's just fantasy with elements of romance and mystery and things in there as well. I rated this one 4 stars, and this fulfilled a prompt, I think, for Magical Readathon. Yeah, it was for the last in the animal studies category of Elder Dragon Care, which is the last in the series. And so there is actually a novella after this book, but I'm not counting that because it's not a full-length novel. So in my brain, this is the last in the series. And when I read it, it was the last one I owned, because I now have Holly, the novella, but I didn't when I read this one. I also then counted it 4. So alongside the readathon, G does like a year-long challenge. This one was like a choose your own adventure, and for September my prompt ended up being a light blue cover, which it was really hard to find something with a light blue cover that I owned. But they are, so like the actual book itself is extremely pale blue, and like the flowers, while slightly purple, are mostly blue. So I'm going with that, and like everything inside is just extremely blue. So I'm going with that. I also love these editions. They're the American hardbacks, I think. I bought them all from Sci-Fi. But they're gorgeous. So yeah, glad I finally got to it. But now I've got to read the novella, so who knows when that will happen. So the next prompt that I fulfilled was for the restoration lesson. And that was Unbroken Focus Tincture, which is a single POV. And I read Uncharmed by Lucy Jane Wood. I own the gorgeous hardback to go alongside my first book by Lucy Jane Wood, but I actually listened to this one on audio, which is not something I do often. I would like to do more of it because I have a lot of hobbies which need focus, so I think listening to them would be a great way to be reading alongside doing it something else. But yeah, this one we follow Annie, Andromeda Wildwood, who has a very perfect life. She's always very put together, looks, her hair and her clothes are all very pretty put together. She never wears the same outfit twice. She runs a small bakery and kind of imbues her magic into everything she does and sells. So she's very much what she thinks is perfect witch. However, Annie's life is kind of uprooted a little bit when she's tasked by her coven to help a troubled teenage girl and kind of discover the root of her power and kind of mentor her into her becoming of a witch. And Annie soon realises that her perfect life isn't quite so perfect, and the facade that she puts on isn't kind of what it's all cracked up to be. I really enjoyed Lucy Jane Wood's writing. I know I listened to it, but it definitely sounds and reads the way that she speaks, if that makes sense. She is a content creator, and I started out by watching her videos on YouTube years ago, so it was great then to read a book by her, especially because you could almost hear it in her voice. And I really like the world that she's created. It is set in London, in and around London, but it obviously is like a magical version. Well, it's normal London, but there are a lot of witches in there, and I'm not sure if it was mentioned in here or whether it's just the accent that the narrator chose, but the love interest is Welsh, which was fun. He has like, here's a Welsh accent. And this is another one where romance is a subplot rather than the main plot. Her books tend to lean towards like kind of finding yourself and self-love, self-worth, rather than love interest and romance, which I really enjoy. But there are usually romance subplots, which is also a great way of getting that in there. But yeah, I rated this one again a 4 stars, so I'm doing pretty well with all the 4 stars. I think that was my like most used rating for the month, and I do kind of think I may have enjoyed this one more than the first one, but I think that's because I liked Annie a little bit more than I liked Bella, or Belle. Was it Belle? Belladonna, her name was in the first one. But yeah, I did enjoy this one more. And then the final prompt that I had to fulfill was for alchemy, which was liquid sunlight, and that is to have a sun on the cover. And this one actually was the book that I entailed to read for this prompt, and that was Road Trip with a Vampire by Gemma Levine, and there is a little sun up there in the corner. So this one follows Zelda, who is a very notorious witch in her world, but 10 years ago she decided to leave that life behind and start more of a normal life, and she moved to California, I want to say. I'm sure it was California, to open a yoga studio, and she took on a different name. She kind of dropped her whole life and didn't tell anyone where she was going. So she's been trying to live this very ordinary life since then. She's barely doing any magic, just enough to like get by, and so her powers don't like overwhelm her. And then one day a man called Peter turns up, and he ends up being a vampire who's in need of her help. He was sent her way by one of her old friends, and he has lost his memories, and the only thing he can remember is it Chicago? Indiana. The only thing he can remember is that he needs to go to Indiana, and the key to unlocking his memories should be there. So Zelda ends up going on a cross-country road trip with this vampire to help him rediscover his memories, but in doing so uncovers some plots and ploys that she's trying to leave behind in her previous life. So it was a fun time. That's pretty much all I've got to say about it. It was a third in a series, well, companion novel series, and I haven't read the other two. So I think if I'd read them, I would have had more of an idea about how the world works and the way the magic systems are and things, because I kind of felt like this was doing too much. Like it was trying too hard to be different in a way that witch and vampire novels aren't really. Yeah, I wasn't too sure. It wasn't bad, like I did have enjoyment in it, but I did truthfully skim read a lot of this, and I was just reading the dialogue because the road trip lasts quite a while. It doesn't need to last that long. I did enjoy though that at the beginning of every like chapter we have a little flashback section, which is either like a news article or something to do with Zelda's life, or then Peter's little bits of memory that he's regaining. So that's fun. And yeah, it had a third act breakup, semi unnecessary, but we all know it's going to happen in like every romance ever. But yeah, I rated it 3.5, but it's not really one that I'm gonna think about ever again. Those, alongside the 3 that I currently don't have but I'll put a picture of here, were all the books I read in September. Like I said, The Nightingale was my only 5-star read, and that was my favourite book of the month. And yeah, please feel free to let me know if you've read any of these, and what you thought of them in the comments, and whether you agree with my thoughts or ratings. And let me know what you read in September. And oh, go back and check out that TBR video if you're interested in seeing what else I was gonna read this month and then decided not to and put these in their place instead. But thank you very much for watching. Feel free to like and subscribe if you want to see more bookish content from me, and I'll see you again in another video.